Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dragon Talk. I am Greg Tito, and I'm going to get right into the interview with these two amazing gentlemen. We have Arnie Jorgensen. Hello.
Hello, everybody.
And Alex Thomas. Hi.
Hi. Glad to be here.
Both of you from Stoic Games, or Stoic Studio, correct? Stoic Studio? Or is
Stoic Studio, but we just call it Stoic.
All right.
Yeah.
So you guys look very stoic in your emotional states right now. You're like, I've never heard that joke before.
We try. To play the part.
So you guys are busy working on Banner Saga 3. It's coming out very soon, if not already, correct?
It actually came out the 26th.
26th.
So a few days ago, and it's been a really great launch so far. You know, there's a couple bugs we're hammering out. So it is true that we're still working on Banner Saga 3, but it's out. It's out on every device known to man except for mobile right now.
Nice, very cool. I can't wait to jump into it. I played a lot of the first Banner Saga, and I'm excited to continue that saga because it has so much great storytelling within it, very similar to Dungeons and Dragons. And it was no surprise to me to learn that many of the folks behind it were Dungeons and Dragons fans. So, Arnie, why don't we start with you? When was your first experience playing Dungeons and Dragons?
My first experience playing Dungeons & Dragons was in front of an A&P, and if you live in the Northeast, you know what that store is.
That's right. Where did you grow up?
Long Island.
Long Island. All right. I was in Connecticut. I could on the Long Island Sound, so I could see.
Yeah, we literally from our backyard could look across to Bridgeport.
Nice.
So, yeah, we used to sail across there all the time and whatnot.
I was closer to New London, but go ahead with your how do you play in front of a grocery store?
So my cousin came into town and we were really young. Oh my gosh, I can't remember what age I was. I must have been like 9 or something like that. And he said, I've been playing this game called Dungeons and Dragons. So we had no paper, we had no dice, and he just started making up stuff and my brain exploded. And I really think that the early days of Dungeons and Dragons, and there was another game, Adventure, we used to play, but all pen and paper stuff was really what got me into games. I mean, it's that simple. That's what got me into the love of games. And then, of course, another video game got me into actual video games and design and doing that for a living.
What was it about that experience of playing in front of the grocery store that just brought it forward for you?
Yeah, before you had DVDs or VHS or anything, there was just TV. And I remember one time I was watching TV and on comes this show called The Hobbit, like the old animated.
I love that one.
And my gosh, I just got so into it. So then I went and I read the books, I read Lord of the Rings, and you're kind of just imagining, wouldn't it be neat to live in that world? And then here comes somebody with a game where you could actually kind of live and delve into that world. And I think that really kind of caught me at a young age of you can do anything. And it's still that way. I still play D&D with my kids. We still run campaigns, and it's really different than video games for us because my kids love video games too, but they're way more into D&D and pen and paper stuff because you get with a group of people in real life and you can do anything. Video games, as much as I love them, there's a lot of things you can do, a lot of things you can't do, and you eventually understand the game. Oh, okay, I press this button and this, but you can't just climb a wall and jump through a window and run out and fight a dragon or whatever. So I think the newer generation that's playing D&D, I know right now D&D is like as big as it's ever been.
Yeah.
And the newer generation that plays it loves video games, and then they play one game of D&D and that's it. Like they would rather do that than play any video game or anything. So it still has the same exact feeling to this newer generation as it had with me.
Right. What do you remember? What character you played in that first session?
No idea.
It was probably like a fighter or dwarf or elf. It was like
something.
Yeah.
It melded together into this is so awesome. I've got to go out and look up the books and find out like where do I go? The library? I didn't know.
Nice.
How to get into it.
What about you, Alex? What was your first experience like playing Dungeons and Dragons?
I probably have the polar opposite to Arnie's story, in which I didn't have that group of people who wanted to play it when I was a kid. So my first almost experience was this game called Heroes Quest, which was like a board game, but it had a lot of D&D kind of similarities. And trying to get my family to play that was a huge chore. Like they didn't get it at all, but I was like, this is so awesome. We got to make it work. Anyway, eventually I kind of moved on, went to college, got a job in games, and didn't actually play D&D proper until 30 something. Because before all that time, it was like, I had these coworkers who were such like D&D aficionados that they had like moved on to all the different branching properties. Like, they wanted to do Cthulhu and Lord of the Rings, and like so they had like done their 20 years of D&D and were
Yeah.
off into the weeds. And I finally got back to the roots like not too long ago. And played it. And it was always something that really appealed to me because the whole fantasy setting, I think, is just something that, it's like a natural fit for playing this really kind of made up realm,
Yeah.
where everybody's cooperative imagination.
But you can imagine, I play games that Alex DM'd, and he wrote the Banner Saga 1 and 3, and he was creative director for the first one. So you can imagine how fun the modules are that he writes. And he took a short stint away from Stoic for a while. And, a good part of your time, Alex, was creating stories in the D&D world, right?
Yeah. I was going to do a side project that was all D&D standalone campaigns.
Cool.
My immediate reaction to like playing role-playing games wasn't like, oh, what character do I want to be? It was like, I'm going to DM now.
Yeah. I'm just going to figure out how to do that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really all-consuming once you start thinking about it,
It is. It's a totally different kind of writing, but also game writing. Like, so many people write in the video game world and scripts and dialogue and things like that. And there's some of that in role-playing game writing when you're homebrewing your own world, but it's so much about like, well, the characters and players may choose to go down this path, but they probably aren't. So you don't want to flesh it out too much.
Yeah, you quickly find out how different it is just because, like Arnie was saying, you can do anything, which means the players are going to immediately go off the rails, and even what we do, which is try to make as branching a story as we can with the Banner Saga, it's nowhere near the level that a group of people at a table can take it.
You can do a lot in the Banner Saga. You can't do everything you can think of,
Yeah, you can't just be like, let's go to a different country now, and you're like, no, can't.
Right, but that's also hell for a DM. I mean, the last module I played with Alex, he created was about a green dragon that kind of comes into town and destroys this paladin, a high-level wizard, and limps away in pain. And and you escape from this jail that from the town that he came into. And as players, you have to go along with the ride. Like, we can't say, no, we're not going to go after the green dragon. You know what? Let's go try to steal a ship and cross an ocean. Like, so there is a little of that even in D&D.
I think I saw
everything.
You can't, right? You try to steer them, but you never know. I think I saw a tweet just this morning that was, in your homebrew setting, you create this town with all these intricate plots and connections in between all of them, and you spend all of your time doing that. And similar to how you just described, I think they said that the players came and got on a boat and left the town within the same day.
Well, we played a game with Piper, Alex's daughter, one time, and she became, she was really into her character, and she realized this game is about like, my character can die. So
she didn't know that until about halfway through the first game, and she was like, they can die like forever.
And then she treated it like it was real. Like, I am this character, and everything I'd prepared for them. Like, okay, you come across this outcropping, rocky outcropping, and up on top, you see these shapes, wandering among ruins. We go around it. It was immediate. Don't go up, go around it. And she avoided every fight possible.
Because she was just living in that fear.
Why do I want to die? Yeah, I'd rather go find a nice place to hang out. Let's go fishing,
See, she just wanted to live the Hobbit lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
How old is Piper?
She's just turned 9. She was playing kind of the half elf, not half elf, the halfling druid.
So she was already very hobbity.
Yeah, immediately went into that mode.
That's awesome. What about your kids, Arnie? How old are they?
I've got 8 and 12, but my
Oh,
sister and my nephews live right across the street, so we have a game of 5 kids playing, and it's awesome. Anyway, ages anywhere from my youngest wasn't playing the last one, so anywhere from 12 to 14 with 5 kids, and it's like a perfect age.
that is perfect.
They're really into it.
Yeah, my girls are 7 and 5, and the 5-year-old is just really on the cusp of being able to. She can't read yet. She's going to join that, and like once she levels up, in her own life, I feel like it's going to be, I'll bring in all the neighbors and we'll start doing a lot more. We've tried a few times, but we can only really get around like 20, 25-minute sessions before
Yeah,
the boredom sets in.
yeah.
But maybe that's just my fault as a bad DM.
No, it's not. This has been the best time because I have like a built-in team that will play more often than I could possibly hope to be able to play. I've
Right.
never had that before. Usually you kind of try to get a team together every week or 2 weeks, and then usually 1 or 2 people can't make it. So this has been really great.
It is great, and it's funny because I see my own story reflected in both of yours. Where I was like you, Arnie, where I got the Rankin Bass Hobbit animated in my head, sang all the songs, and my brother was older. He's 8 years older than me, and he was reading the book, and he was telling me all these things that weren't in the movie, and I was like, oh my god, that's so great. So I started reading it and fell in love with that world. And then it was very similar to you, Alex, where then I wanted to try and get all my family and all my friends to play, and nobody wanted to. Everybody was just kind of like, yeah, no, it's not our thing. And I was begging and begging and begging, and it never happened. So I didn't actually start playing until I was in my 20s, but like later in life when I was of the idea, I'm like, oh wait, I can organize this on my own. I have organizational skills that can be put to bear on making sure people show up at the right time and all that, and put together a game on my own. So. It doesn't matter. We meet people who have those experiences very formatively in the 70s and 80s, but there's also this, you can jump in at any time, at any age, and still get something out of the storytelling.
I totally agree. And this has probably been the most gratifying few months, I guess, in all my pen and paper life, because we've got people right now on Twitch and elsewhere. They're coming up with D&D 5e rule sets to play Banner Saga, playing the Banner Saga. And I'm watching them playing it. And, my whole life I hung out with, I'd hang out with jocks and this and that, and, D&D, what we would consider nerds back in the day. And it's funny, growing up, I used to have friends like get so tired of me for like lugging around these fantasy books. And it's all I talked about. Oh man, all you do is talk about fantasy, you're going to have to grow up or whatever. And then it's so gratifying to me right now to be in my mid 40s, watching people playing D&D, in our Banner Saga world, just kind of going, you know what? I guess I didn't have to grow up totally. We did it.
Yeah, you made it.
You made it.
We made it. Yeah, and I'm like, see, you punks, what are you doing?
Right? No,
playing D&D.
You get, and honestly, I mean, maybe this is because I also get this from some, parents of my kids' friends or something like that. But there is the ones that are able to play as adults, and it doesn't have to be Dungeons and Dragons, but just playing in general is so healthy, especially when you have kids, but even in just adulthood, to be able to turn off the worries of the world a little bit and just, mess around, do fun stuff. And it's always the parents that don't do that I'm like, I don't know about you. So I don't think you have to grow up. I think it's better to not. And
I met a few parents here where I live in Texas that are totally into it, which is really interesting.
That is good.
So I'm going to try to get a game going with some of the parents as well with the kids.
Nice. And you're right. The prevalence of people streaming and online has changed the whole landscape because it no longer is something that's relegated to game stores or out of the public eye. It's people can see it and they get entertainment out of it. That is totally additive to the game, the fun that the people have in playing it, which I find fascinating. You guys just did Hyper RPG just did a stream of Adam Coble playing
That's
Banner
right.
Saga. How did that go?
It was freaking phenomenal. It was a blast. Alex, did you watch that?
Yeah, I caught about an hour and a half of that, the first one.
What did you think?
I mean, like Arnie was saying, it's almost bizarre watching people role play the thing that you made up, like in a shack a couple years ago.
Wait, why were you in a shack? I want to get to the bottom of that story.
We had our first studio we lovingly called the Goat Shack because it was actually used as a shack in a farmer's market for a while before someone plastered a door on the front of it and then started charging rent.
Nice.
But it was in like a good spot, and it was a really good time. It was like the scrappy indie thing to do, you know. And
some people make hardware and games out of their garage, but you guys had a goat shack.
This was worse than a garage. The bathrooms were outside in like like an outhouse kind of thing, and
yeah, there were fleas and.
But it was next door to an awesome bar, so it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
You were engrossing yourself in the world of Banner Saga.
That's right.
Yeah, it kind of felt like that too. I mean, it was before we didn't have anything but doing the Banner Saga. It was the three of us, myself, Alex, and John. So we got to really just tune out everything else except for creating this world. Even nowadays, we have so much on our plate. You know, it's a bigger company. We have lots of different SKUs coming out, and just stuff to do in general. So it's almost like you can't go back to those days, really.
Yeah, and I think that was always part of the mystique of, Steve Jobs and whatever talking about that garage. It was like, oh, that was just a very specific moment in time that, it was more idealized than anything else.
We try to recreate it. Oh, go on, Alex.
Oh, I was going to say, I think there's something too that it's just like the garage represents this place where you can focus on stuff and work together as a tight unit for a long time without all the distractions.
Yeah.
We try to recreate that from time to time. We have sometimes design meetings, and we kind of go off-site to, just hang out outside and get away from the office, and that helps you kind of focus as well.
So when you guys were coming up with the idea for the first Banner Saga, was that inspired by your play of Dungeons and Dragons? Because in playing that game, it definitely felt like, oh, all right, this is and I pardon if this is the wrong comparison, but it feels like XCOM but in a D&D fantasy world.
Right. Well, I mean, to be completely honest, I grew up as a video game kid because I just couldn't get that group of people. But I think the games that I was drawn to were the ones like Baldur's Gate, which is obviously a D&D session. And I wanted that feeling that, there are other people and they had their own lives and they were making their own decisions. And I wasn't just like gaming a system. I would, in some way, I wonder if like what I was trying to do was to make a game, that had other people in it,
Right.
Just invent this thing.
Yeah, I think for my part, it was, it goes hand in hand with, growing up my whole life reading fantasy novels, and then sort of designing many, many D&D sessions, because I never, we kind of made up our own stuff for the most part. So it was really kind of a world building thing.
Mm-hmm.
I loved really getting into, and it was a lot of back and forth with Alex and I, just kind of going deeper and deeper and deeper into the lore. That's kind of the same feeling I get with D&D whenever I'm playing as a DM. I want the world to feel kind of alive and cohesive and living. And I think we kind of got real deep in that with the Banner Saga.
For sure. I mean, when you design that stuff, a large part of it is thinking about how other people are going to take it in, just like being a DM, it's gratifying to write a fictional history of the universe and then have other people take it seriously, and want to learn about it. And that was a big motivating factor for me. I remember sitting down and writing like, this is the entire history of, the gods creating the universe and how it all worked, and thinking like, wow, I just actually made something that, other people are going to know.
Yeah, that's super gratifying. And there's also these amazing like Norse feel to Banner Saga. How did that? What was the inspiration behind that?
There actually wasn't a whole lot of debate about that. I wanted to make a fantasy game, but we didn't want it to be the same, like World of Warcraft had just come out. We didn't want it to be the same kind of vanilla fantasy. And, Arnie Jorgensen has some history with the Scandinavian culture. And, as soon as we started looking into like some really the depths of Norse mythology, you can there's so much there to pull inspiration from. He goes deep.
Yeah, that I grew up when I was really little. I grew up reading sort of Norse myths and books about Leif the Lucky and Eric the Red and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think even previous to D&D and Lord of the Rings, I was already into sort of the elves, things living under the ground, the dwarves, and so maybe thinking about it now, maybe that's why Lord of the Rings and D&D kind of was so powerful with me, because it kind of dovetailed with what I was into anyway.
Right, because there is a lot of Norse in the peoples of the North in The Hobbit and all that type of stuff, as well as right in D&D. I mean, there was Thor and Odin and all of those gods in the Deities and Demi's God book. Like they were all statted up in there.
I got it right behind me somewhere. But yeah, I mean, Tolkien totally wrote with the Aesir and trolls and giants, and that stuff is all comes from the Norse.
Yeah.
But when Alex and I first got along, it was really a medieval story, and Alex had this story, and then we just changed the backdrop to be a little bit different and change it to become Norse. That at that time the Norse, especially turn-based strategy, was not a thing. We thought we were breaking new ground. Maybe people would like it, maybe not. And then it like exploded with the Vikings TV show and stuff like that. Now Norse is like big,
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but it's more mainstream now, right?
Almost. Yeah.
No, right. Vikings did come out kind of concurrently with when you guys were putting out that first one, so that that would have made a lot of sense. Yeah, I like that show.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I like it too.
Good inspiration for things. So turn-based strategy is also a very D&D thing, right? I mean, that's essentially how the combat is handled when you're rolling initiative and taking the turns, right? So there's also that dovetailing there with the mechanics. So yeah, can you talk a little bit about, were you inspired there, or did you take things back and forth?
I think so. I mean, when I do D&D, I still use minis and stuff. We actually use our minis from the War Bands game that we put out. They're really cool minis. But we use those in conjunction with other D&D minis, and so I've always kind of played it that way.
One of the ways we were able to iterate on the early gameplay was because me and Arnie would get together and then play like on a board.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, we were able to like change the rules as we were playing it, move the pieces around, and see how it was going to play out quickly.
That's really smart.
At some point, I think the rules became really difficult to keep our minds wrapped around, because every unit had a passive ability and they had an active ability, and they would interact differently, and you'd have chain reactions. Eventually it was like, okay, we got to build this out into a demo to be played on a computer. But that's why the whole game is on a flat board. A lot of people are saying you should use height, you should use this, and that's not the point. It's basically a flat board, game.
Right. It's like saying like, oh, chess, put some hills on chess to make it better.
Not so easy. I mean, it could make it look different, but it's not going to affect the tactics. So what's the point?
Yeah.
Our game was designed that way, and we just kind of stuck with it.
That's really cool. I want to see almost pictures or videos of you guys playing with the pieces on the board to test out the ability. We had
some stuff in the Kickstarter video, didn't we, Alex? We put it out with us on the board and, playing it and whatnot. But I think that was kind of B-roll. Like that was not an actual session. That was us just showing.
Just messing around. This is dramatization. May not have happened.
Yeah, reenactment.
Reenactment. You guys had to wear the clothes you would have worn during that day.
It's just like any other B-roll. Hey, get in front of the computer, start drawing. Like you're actually drawing this piece that's been done for a long time, and you just kind of trace lines, and it looks good on video.
Isn't that so funny? I love that. Yeah.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
So from an outside perspective, I'm not really sure, but from an inside perspective, why is it that you think that D&D 5e like just exploded? It's gotten bigger now. How did this work? How did it, just sort of rise in the public's eye and have more people playing all of a sudden?
Well, it's very hard to have a one-to-one correlation. We don't know exactly, but we have a few theories. I think D&D 5th edition came out in 2014, but before that, it was a 2+ year, I think it was 2.5 year public playtest where Mike Mearls, Jeremy Crawford, and the rest of the team put out rules and tested everything. Like tested, like, what do you guys think about this? What do you guys think about this? Things that were more, combat heavy 4th edition type things, or, here's something that we just thought might be fun. Let us know what you think. And there was, more than 175,000 people who signed up and participated in that D&D playtest. And we think that, there was a lot. I mean, being in here internally, I came in only 3 years ago, so I heard a lot of these stories. But there was some talk of like, oh, if we give away some of that, it will, people won't want to play the game because they're getting it for free or something like that, right? So it was like a new idea for the way things were run here at D&D, and we think that catalyzed the change, right, and made it so that it didn't feel like the people here at Wizards of the Coast were in some ivory tower and we're just being like, these are the rules, blah blah blah, and dictated them out. The public had. Could shape it, and then we could also know like this. Okay, this feels fun. Is it fun for everyone? And it ended up being fun. Like that's how the advantage mechanic that Mearls came up with, where you roll 2 d20s and take the higher. That was just something that was thrown into a playtest, and people really lashed onto it, and it became baked into being a big part of D&D 5th edition. So stuff like that, I think, really made it have a good launch in 2014. And then also, I mean, we've touched on it a few times, is streaming, is being able to watch people play a game is so huge. Much more illustrative in how a game is played, right? I mean, right. If you think about baseball or football or, any of the sports that are like, people just know the rules of right now, you didn't learn those rules by reading a manual. If you looked at the manual for baseball, you'd be like, this is gibberish. I don't understand any of this. But you watch the game and you talk about it, and you have someone who's a little bit more experienced than you tell you why that strategy and those things were made. And it wasn't until the technology of having people be able to stream from home, as well as places like here on D&D Twitch channel, that it became codified where people could watch it, and then there was this chat to be able to be like, oh no, this is what's going on, this is what's happening here. It dispelled a lot of the myths. I think there were so many people who knew what D&D was but had never experienced it in that way, right? And obviously playing is your best way to learn, but watching is I think a very close second. And I think the growth of Twitch and streaming platforms on the video game side, and then having tabletop be a small percentage of that is also growing, contributed a lot to 2017 being the record-breaking year that it was for Dungeons and Dragons.
I totally agree. It's become really accessible, and even the rules for D&D 5e seem really streamlined. You can pick it up. It's not, you're not when we're playing, you're not sitting there debating rules. Your nose isn't a book that long. It's it's very understandable, very streamlined, and it lets the play keep going. So
right. Really well, and that I didn't even, but the rules themselves, I think the team here did a fantastic job of using parts of previous iterations of Dungeons and Dragons and making it really feel like 5th was an edition for all. Like you didn't, if you loved 3.5, there was something for you that you could latch onto. If you loved 4th edition, you could, latch onto certain mechanics that like the cantrips for spellcasters is a great example. Where like, all right, that felt right, and that's what should be in all D&D going forward. As well as people who were in the old school Renaissance. The OSR kind of came up in the 2010 kind of era. People who only played Dungeons and Dragons of yore could still approach 5th and be like, all right, this doesn't feel that much different than OD&D, and I can still get onto it. I think that was a brilliant move in making it feel like it was this amalgam of editions, really than anything else. And then bringing character forward. I think bringing flaws and bonds and character-centric characteristics on your character sheet. It made it for better streaming, so that it was more entertainment and personality based. But then it also just, we could really latch onto this idea of storytelling, and that's what you're doing. You're not sitting around crunching numbers and reading manuals all night. You're telling a story together. And I don't think that really coalesced until all of these factors of 5th came into being, and that's why it became more popular for people to stream, and then consequently it became more popular for everyone to just jump in and try.
Perfect storm.
Right.
We played at PAX East in, I believe it was 2014, right, Alex?
I don't know. Yes.
I think it was 2014, PAX East, and they were just rolling out 5e. They had a bunch of I guess I would call them professional DMs down in the bottom floor there. And
Yeah.
we went down as a studio and signed up, for a Stoic game for a round table. It was supposed to be like a 2-hour session. I think it was 4.5 or 5 hours by the time we were done.
Nice.
It was
Yeah.
awesome. It was a lot of fun for the whole team.
E3 is this huge gaming expo with all the new hottest stuff, and the entire time, me and Arnie are like, "Man, can't wait for that D&D session." Like that's all we wanted to do. And then it was a great game. The guy ran it great, and the group of us completed the thing and had a great time, and just makes you want to do more.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
It was
One
a
of the
really funny session.
one of the last judges weeks that I went to as part of the press. We were seeing all the best games apparently coming out of that E3 that year, and I think it was 2014 as well. But one of my former colleagues was like, "Hey, you want to do a D&D session one of these nights?" And we did it one night and then the next night was supposed to be when all these parties were going on. And we were like, "I don't want to go to any of those. We want to just continue that campaign." And we did. We went back, and everyone was kind of like, "What are you guys doing?" And we're like, "We're gonna go play D&D." And yeah, I feel like that's happening a lot in the video game world, where people crave that face to face.
Yep.
Another thing, podcasts were huge for a while, and to speak about streaming and stuff, a lot of people like these extremely long sessions where they can, listen to them at work or whatever they're doing over 6 hours, and kind of in the background. And there isn't very many forms of entertainment that can really sit for that long, and still be entertaining.
Yeah, not even, there's that 6-hour session, but then there's, 155 of them now.
Right,
So,
exactly.
right? The Critical Role campaign that went, 115, 118 sessions or something like that. If you think about that,
that's like months of content.
Right. Yeah. It's 3 times what's been made for Game of Thrones, or even the Harry Potter movies or things like that. And you're right. People love to follow it almost similarly, like it's in a serial format. And I think that was something that, no one would have predicted 5 years ago, 4 years ago.
I think you never know where it's going to go. It's kind of new to people that never got into D&D before, but it's not like a movie or, I read the book, or, it can take any direction on the next page, kind of thing. So it's cool that way.
Yeah, it is cool. And you mentioned podcasts, and I think, I'd be remiss not to mention the audio play is, in addition to streaming, is something that really people, has become this great way to get people into it, right? Like, you could do an audio book, that's one thing, but here you are listening to these characters improvising along the way, and you're right, there's something just super intoxicating about that. And the audio podcast, I mean, Adventure Zone is the top of the list there, but there are hundreds of just audio dramas that are all being created now with Dungeons & Dragons as the framework for the storytelling, which is super exciting.
Yeah.
Adventure Zone was one of those great transitions, I think, for people, because it was obviously this comedy podcast, but they were playing real D&D. And I think it was easy to listen to if you weren't into it. And it was fun to listen to if you were really into it. It's just the more of that kind of stuff that comes out, I think the more, it's going to cross over between people who wouldn't normally consider it.
Agreed. Yeah. And, the folks who are into watching, the Lord of the Rings movies as much as I was, as well as now, Game of Thrones and other shows, even Vikings, things like that. Like, those are so much more water cooler conversations than they were, back in the 80s when D&D was new. I mean, they were still talking about Dallas and General Hospital in the 80s, not so much about,
right.
These genre things.
I can't believe how big Game of Thrones got, with the public. I'm looking at it going, wait a minute, this is the same stuff I've been reading my whole life. And, it didn't seem like the populace was into it. And all of a sudden it exploded. And it was big.
A hard fantasy show. I don't know that that's ever been popular before Game of Thrones.
Maybe the original Lord of the Rings got kind of people warmed up for it, because that was also really big. The movies.
Yeah. I think the Peter Jackson movies, like that, that winning an Oscar, I think catapulted all of this. Because that was 2003, 2002 or something like that, and right, and that, along with the Harry Potter movies, I think really just brought it all into this sharp focus where it's like it's all stories. We all like it. It doesn't matter that it is, something that used to be about elves and dwarves and wands, but now everybody loves that. My kid went to a birthday party that was Harry Potter themed. A couple months ago, everybody was wearing their robes with their wands and stuff. And I was like, man,
I'm amazed that's still that big.
Yeah.
Harry Potter's like the closest thing we've got to Star Wars at this point,
It's true. So yeah, that's super cool. And I love that you guys are championing that kind of storytelling and Banner Saga. So you mentioned a little bit about how it was like, the branching of the dialogue and things is something that you guys are working on to tell stories that it feels like the player has some agency to, but there's limitations. So how do you make it feel like there's limitless storytelling possibilities while also making it able to be coded?
I don't know. I'll let Alex take this one.
Well, I know. I mean, that's a real challenge, and anything of that scope, you don't just have it all in your head. You have to kind of sculpt it as you go. But we always had our top priorities, the things that we had to hit, and you kind of chisel away what can we get away with, and then you'll be on this thread and realize oh my gosh, it'd be super cool if players could do that, and you try to go back and add. It's a lot of kind of it's almost the opposite of DMing in some ways, because you're trying to create these linear experiences, and to the player it feels like a linear experience, like they're just going off on their one story, but to us we know that it just spiderwebs all over the place. In a lot of ways that's a good thing for the player, because it does feel like, instead of this never-ending series of branches, it feels like the thing that happened to them was the real thing.
Yeah, and I think Banner Saga does that really well, and I think the Telltale game Walking Dead, the first one, I think was transcendent in that way, where it felt like you were just going through your story. It didn't feel like you were having a story told at you.
Now, one of the things that I do is mercilessly dissect video games. So I would go through and play all the different branches, or save scum the hell out of it. And one of our major goals with the Banner Saga was that there aren't false choices. And a lot of these games, I understand, you have so many resources, so you have to wrap it up, keep it together. You can't have a wildly different tangent. And in the Banner Saga, one of our highest priorities was to let the player actually make choices that hugely matter. And if the reviews are any indication, I think we actually pulled it off, but it damn near killed us.
It's funny, when we were first doing Banner Saga 1, we knew the story we knew the entire trilogy as far as the basic story from the very beginning, because Alex mapped it all out. But the biggest decision in the very first one, if you played the game, you understand what we're talking about, actually came as an idea way late in the game. And we were talking about what do we do at this point in the game? We want there to really be a major decision to pull players back and end on a cliffhanger. And we came up with that idea, and it was almost like, oh my gosh, you can't do this. And the idea is basically killing off one of the major heroes. And we didn't even know what it would mean for the next games and how to maintain that and how to keep it going. But it was a huge diversion. And from that moment on, we had to keep all those same decisions that the players made. And then we once we did that and people really loved it, we just kept it going all the way through to Banner Saga 3 with major decisions that can really change the game from one player to another. So it was what we're known for. But like Alex said, I don't know if we need to take a break for a little while, maybe, from this.
There was a lot of decisions that was like, this is right for the story, and this would be awesome to let the player choose. Are we cool with doubling the amount of content we now have to produce from now on? And we go, oh yeah, let's try, It
was, at every step, though, it was always like, we have to put our best foot forward. It's the coolest thing to do right now. We'll figure it out later, like how to make this work. And we just kind of kept ironing out the wrinkles, in the story all the way to the end of Banner Saga 3 that way.
That's crazy. So, I mean, I'm so curious to like look at how the documents, like what the spreadsheet looks like in order to map all of these branching dialogue. Like what tools do you guys use to do that, to write it,
YouTube.
yeah, what do you guys do?
We look at our wiki a lot. We ask our community what was that again that happened. We didn't really have spreadsheets for all the decisions that could be. So for a lot of the stuff that Alex was writing, he would just track it down on the net.
Wow.
Yeah. To kind of clarify, I don't even know if it would be possible to really spreadsheet out all the choices and all the things that can happen in a readable way. So a lot of it just relies on us kind of knowing. One of the biggest problems with game development is anytime you try to do this design doc, design changes so quickly and like story changes so frequently that keeping it up to date and correct is very difficult, especially when you have multiple people working on the same project.
Yeah.
So a lot of it really relied on just having some of us know everything about the game, and then being able to ask our super fans, things that we forgot.
I guess I mean as a writer of scripts and things that are very linear, I can go back and look at my process and see how that works. But so what you're telling me, there is no living document of all of the dialogue in Banner Saga 3. It was all kind of done as it was being developed.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, each individual dialogue is a separate file, and there's no repository where you can just sort through everything that's been written and see all the branches.
But then, of course, then that you said it requires the special knowledge of you guys as developers. But then you left for a time. So how did that work with Banner Saga 2?
Well, I mean, I was on call to answer stuff, but
Arnie was like, "Get in your stat. We don't understand what's happening."
Well,
no, but really, Arnie knows quite a lot of it as well. It's
okay,
not
good.
As much as I do. So that there are people available for that.
But thankfully, the person that was helping Alex that wrote a lot of the side quests for Banner Saga 1, he was another writer, Drew McGee, and at the time he was kind of cruising across Australia, typing as he sat on a beach, and so he really knew the whole lore as well. And when Alex took a break, he came in and was the main writer for Banner Saga 2, and he did a fantastic job. But it was really lucky that we didn't have to bring a new guy in, train him up, because that would have needed, okay, crap, we got to take a side. We need to sidetrack and write a bunch of design docs to get him up to speed. So it was really cool that Drew could hop in and do that.
That was lucky. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
If a couple of us died in a car crash, it'd be serious problems. But I mean, that's not to say you couldn't go back into the files, reverse engineer all of it. It would just be time consuming.
Right. You just didn't have that like kind of working knowledge of being as intimate with the material. That takes some time.
It's a weird game in that you can't just say, well, okay, the new writers start off by playing the games, because he would have to play Banner Saga 1 like 10 times to try to figure out he'd have to pick different decisions every single time and try to figure out all the trees. So there is some difficulty there. It's not like a lot of the other games I've worked on where you can play the game and get it,
Unless you play like Alex does and do tons of saves coming.
That's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, what I'm trying to bring this back to D&D is like, are there any lessons learned from this process that has changed the way that you dungeon master or that you tell stories, or even as a player, that you can see the illusions that the dungeon master is doing by giving you the illusion of choice, but not actually giving you a meaningful choice? Like, how has your game playing, gone back and forth between developing this digital game and the analog game of D&D?
Well, developing the digital kind of story where everything is rock solid and has an arc and has pacing and has character development, that's all like extremely like high difficulty stuff. And I feel like the beauty of D&D is that you are reacting to your players. They're not reacting to you so much. And it's such a different style of kind of interacting in an imaginary world that it's something that I would really like to experiment more with, because my inclination, like when I have tried to run some games, is it does tend to come out like I'm hoping they go this way because that's where all the content is,
Right.
and there's some understanding from the beginning, like, hey, here's the premise, do we all agree that we're working towards this? But I would love to work in a more freeform setting where it is more like the group decides where they're going and what they're doing. um, Something that we're always really interested in at Stoic is world building. And I think once you have this really defined world building kind of experience, you can have it open up to these kind of more player driven narratives.
Does that make sense on your end, Arnie? Have you learned anything from making Banner Saga that you use in your home game?
Yeah, I think on a few levels. When Alex is talking about, well, for one, the first thing that hit me is that I'm used to working in a box. Like we've actually found in video games that working within a box or constrictions really helps us. You don't want the whole world to be totally open. You kind of want to know what our borders are, and then really flesh it out deeply from there. And it helps you stay focused. I think in D&D, I think you really do have to try to organically lead people where you want them to go. And if they get off the rails, I'm totally happy to ad lib for a while, but trying to bring them back onto the rails eventually. But good grief, what was I about to say about that? Oh, I think even when I'm playing D&D, if I'm not DMing or something, I'm happy to play within the box. So let's say, for instance, if Alex is DMing and I'm playing, I understand where the story's going. And it doesn't detract from that for me to be like, but I want to go anywhere. Like I follow the story and I go with it. And we have little twists and turns that we take along the way. But I think that's kind of part of the relationship between player and DM that you have to have. I mean, there is that acknowledgement that this is the adventure. We're trying to go basically in this direction. And it can go south from there. I mean, you could have a guy that you're relying on at the end to hand scroll to the people and they kill him. Yeah, okay. Like that's totally within the realm of awesomeness. But don't realize that we're trying to kill a green dragon and go the opposite direction.
Right. Like I'm going to go chase this donkey, not that dragon. And you're like, all right, well, that's a totally different game.
So I guess kind of living within a box is the most thing that I've learned. I just see how it dovetails between video games and then pen and paper.
I agree with that.
Sweet. All right. Well, now I'm really excited to play Banner Saga 3 and suss out all of. Well, I played one. I get through one and then do two and then get to three. Of course, I don't want to skip the line. That's never a good idea with this kind of a story, right?
You know what we're hoping? I mean, a lot of people play Banner Saga 1, and then when they realized, oh, this is a trilogy, they go, I'll just wait for it to be done. Like, I'm not going to play Banner Saga 2 and then wait a couple more years. So what we're really trying to do right now is let people know that you can go up on Steam or whatever device you have and download the trilogy now. It's kind of like, binging on your favorite Netflix series or something.
Oh, yeah.
We're hoping a lot of people at this point just go, I'm going to buy the whole thing, because the whole game is designed to be played and digested in really one long session. It wasn't supposed to be broken up 2 years apart. We just couldn't do the entire game fast enough with a small team. So It makes a lot more sense if people haven't hopped on, or if they played Banner Saga 1, but it was 6 years ago or 4 years ago rather, hop in now and play the entire series. You'll realize that the combat and everything kind of ramps up and changes as you go. And we think that this was always the way it was supposed to be enjoyed, was as one game,
That's kind of cool. All right. So it's not like it is like Lord of the Rings in that, it was broken up in volumes just for convenience sake. It was supposed to be one continuous story.
And you kind of have to say that because so many times these days you have games that are like, oh, such and such game. I don't want to name games, and then you have, such and such 2. And really 2 is totally divorced. Sometimes even the combat's totally different. They have a different camera angle. They call it 2.
Hey, I like 2. All right. I gave 2 5 stars.
Yeah. Some IPs, you might like the second one more than the first because it's really different. Banner Saga is really the same game that just ramps up and modifies through story over the 3. So it's a little bit different, I think, than what most people are used to.
Yeah.
And quality. I like to think that over the 6 years we've been developing it, we've gotten a lot better on every front, combat, story, animations and cutscenes and things. So 3 is definitely, in my opinion, the strongest of the games, but they work, they're meant to be played all at once. We originally set out to make a single game and then quickly realized our ambition was ridiculous.
Which is a good thing. It's good to have ridiculous ambitions sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was. It became, even breaking it up, it was a ridiculous ambition for us. So,
well, congratulations on getting it out, having all three games, and/or one game out with 3 chapters. It's really fascinating storytelling. If people haven't picked it up, I definitely suggest, if you like D&D, as well as the flavor of turn-based combat and the I don't want to say the shockingness of it, but the turns that the story takes are not, I think, what many people would suspect upon playing through any kind of tropey game like this. So, I'm excited for it.
Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy it.
Thanks a lot.
You mentioned it on you can get it on Steam and other platforms. What are all the platforms that it's on now? Right now?
Steam, Switch, PlayStation, Xbox.
Choose your favorite, basically.
Yeah, it's on everything but mobile.
Nice.
If you have a favorite platform, just go get it.
Awesome. And what about you guys? Where can people find out about what's going on with Stoic, or you guys individually?
Just go up to bannersaga.com. And we've got all the latest news up there, and whatever else is going on within the studio.
Yeah, we got a lot going on for whatever comes next, but we'll definitely make sure people hear about it when we're ready.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Do you guys have any personal Twitter handles or anything you want to get out there for people if they have questions? Or
talking to the 2 wrong guys for that.
All right.
A lot of other people at the studio would come back with an answer, but we have none.
Good. All right. Good for you. Stay analog while you can.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it was great talking to you guys. I'm excited to learn more. Hopefully we'll be at an event or convention at the same time and maybe roll some dice together.
We should really hook up. That'd be a lot of fun.
Good times.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Excellent. Well, thank you to all of the guests today, Serena Marie, Brandon Stennis, Arnie Jorgensen, and Alex Thomas, for keeping me company when Ms. Shelley Mazanoble is away. It's all I could do to keep these questions flowing. I really missed her doing all these interviews, but she'll be back, I think, in 2 weeks' time. I will be recording, I think, some Lori Should Know segments next Monday without her, but we need some segments to get in here, so that'll be a thing. Speaking of segments, tomorrow I will be taking over the Dragon Plus slot for Mr. Bart Carroll, who's also on vacation, talking with Jeremy Crawford on Sage Advice, doing a lot of Q&A in that session. So come watch on twitch.tv/DND at 2 p.m. Pacific time for that. We got a long list of questions, but we might take some with chat and then edit that into a segment for this here Dragon Talk podcast. So that should be pretty exciting. But before that, at 1 p.m. Pacific time, is Mike Merles doing his Happy Fun Hour, designing things in the midst of all of you. I'll be back for, as I said, 2 p.m. for Dragon Plus, 3:30 for Dungeons and Dragons news, and then we have another episode of Dice Camera Action tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific time. I think that's episode 103. But that's not all that's going on tonight at 4:30. So just in about 30 minutes, we have Loading Ready Rung doing their Dice Friends here on this channel, and then of course, Dark and Dicey is coming directly after that at 7 p.m. Pacific time. So lots of fun stuff happening in the next few days here on twitch.tv/DND. You are all amazing people, and I'm going to sign off here for now. So thank you to everyone who is a subscriber on this channel, who follows this channel, and for being in the chat and participating. You are awesome. I'm going to sign off, and I'm going to do some intros without Shelley here on this here microphone. So that's going to be very sad for all to see. And I don't want to make you see it, so I will be crying, mostly tears of joy the whole time. I will be back tomorrow, as I said, at 2 p.m. Pacific time. Otherwise, have fun gaming over the rest of the couple of days. Bye-bye.